Hello everyone, I hope that you are doing well. Recently, I think in February, I posted a video where I was talking about my New Year's resolutions. And one of my resolutions was that I wanted to change my reading habits. In the last couple of years, I realized that my reading habits had really changed. I tended to really rush through every book that I could get my hands on because I joined Goodreads and I started tracking all of the books I was reading, and I joined reading challenges. And although that's all fun and games, it kind of put pressure on me. I put pressure on myself because I wanted to reach a goal. I wanted to see a certain number at the end of the year. I wanted to say that I had read 50 or 60 books or whatever. And through all of that, I just absolutely lost the joy in reading, completely lost the point of why I pick up a book. I want to get something out of it. I want to slow down. I want to calm down. And when you put pressure on yourself, that's just no fun. It's just gotten a little bit excessive. I just got a little bit excessive when it came to it. And I really wanted to change that this year. And to kind of track my reading habits in a different way, I thought that I would share with you the books that I read so far this year in January and February, and maybe you'll be interested in hearing what I read. I would try to not spoiler you with anything. I would just kind of tell you what they're about, tell you what I thought of them, if I recommend them. And yeah, as I said, not gonna spoiler you with everything in case you want to go out and read them for yourself. So yeah, let's get started. The first book I finished this year was The Hike by Lucy Clark. It's a thriller book, and it follows a group of 4 friends, and their names are Maggie, Liz, Helena, and Joni. They've known each other for quite a long time. They've been friends for quite a long time. I'm pretty sure that they went to school together, and now they're adults. In the first half of the book, you get to know each woman. You get to know about their life stories, their backgrounds, where they come from, and where they're now in life. And also you get to know more about their different dynamics, because obviously with a friend group, some are closer than others. There's different levels of friendships, different levels of closeness, and different dynamics. So you get to learn about that. And then fast forward to present day, 3 of the friends, Maggie, Liz, and Helena, decide to throw themselves in a little adventure. They're traveling to Norway to go on a hike through the Norwegian woods. Joni isn't there to join them because she's living a very different kind of lifestyle at this point in her life. She's a very famous musician, and she's kind of drifted away from the group. She's not that close to them anymore because, again, she's living a very unique lifestyle. And she's not there to join them. But then, just as they're about to set off on their big hike, surprise, she is there to join them. And so their adventure starts, and obviously it's not going to be a smooth ride. Something happens, someone tragically dies, and it seems like there is a killer on the loose. And that's all I'm going to tell you without spoiling anything. I would say this was definitely an entertaining read. I got through it pretty quickly. I didn't find myself bored. I picked it up pretty much every evening, and again, I got through it pretty quickly. But one thing I'm gonna say, it wasn't, I've read a lot of thrillers, and you can't really shock me anymore with plot twists. I think that's for anyone with any genre. When you've read enough of them, you kind of a lot of the times I have a good inkling of what's gonna happen. So there was no point where I was extremely shocked with the storyline that was unfolding, but still, it was definitely very, very entertaining. And I really like the setting in the book. I like the nature setting, the feeling of going camping, of being out on a hike, the feeling of being, in nature, in these woods, somewhere where you've never been, kind of the feeling of something bigger being around you and you feeling so tiny in these huge woods surrounded by so much nature. I definitely enjoyed that setting a lot. And when I look back at that book, that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Not really the story in itself, but just the feeling of being in nature and the smell of the woods. You know, for me, it's always really important how the atmosphere is being portrayed and what I look back on after having read the book. And that's definitely the first thing that comes to mind when I look back at the story. So I would definitely recommend it if you like thrillers. It was a quick read, I would say. It wasn't too consuming. Again, I got through it pretty quickly. And I would give it, let's say, I'd give it a 6 out of 10. The next book that I finished was Tokyo Express. This story starts on a beach where two bodies are found, the body of a man and a woman. And it's believed that they have ended their lives willingly and planned. So when the police arrive at the scene, they think that there's nothing to investigate here because it's a clean and cut case. They took their lives together. But then when two detectives enter the scene, they believe that this is not as clear as it seems, and we start following them as they investigate and figure out what actually happened in this case. And with this book, it was really different to The Hike, the book that I just finished, because with The Hike, I just came from this very, I want to say, atmospheric setting, because it, played in the woods. I could really sense that. And with Tokyo Express, it was a pretty dry story. When you followed the detectives, it was always explained kind of in the same way as, okay, here's the detective. These are his thoughts. Okay, this is where he's going. Okay, here now he's interviewing a suspect. Okay, now he's following this lead. Okay, now these are his thoughts. This is what he's figured out. And it was explained without much atmosphere behind it. I couldn't really imagine myself in the story. But I also want to say, after I finished reading it, I realized that this book was written in 1955, and if I would have known that beforehand, I think it would have changed a lot for me. I would have had different expectations. So this story took a little bit longer for me. It felt more like a slow burn. So when it was revealed what actually happened to the couple, it wasn't, again, I didn't feel any suspense. I wasn't as shocked. But if you like books that are explained in a very logical, chronological way, maybe this is the perfect book for you. It could also be due to the translation, because I read this, this was translated from Japanese to English. It could also be due to that. You never know. Different translators will maybe change the story, different translations. But if you like stories that are explained in a very logical, chronological way, maybe this is the perfect book for you. I'd give it a 4. I'd give it a 4 out of 10. Next up is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. And I've seen this book so many times on social media, but every time I read the description, I kind of shied away from it because the first thing that I read was always love triangle. And maybe I'm not allowed to say this on the internet because I feel like this romance is the most popular genre right now, and everybody seems to love these types of books with the love triangle and the friends to lovers to enemies to whatever. All the dark romance and everything that I feel like no, that's all there is right now on the market. It's all just romance books, and I've read too much of it. I'm kind of a little bit over it right now. Maybe maybe that would change again, but right now I wanna read something else. I love romance and love is great, but I want to read something else. I'm kind of sick of it at the moment. Maybe next time I film one of these videos, it's gonna be completely filled with romance books. But right now, I want to read something else. But I was so happy when I started reading this book that it did not just mainly evolve around this love triangle, because the story follows Casey Peabody. She's 31 and she's currently waiting tables, but it's her heart's desire to publish a book which she's been working on for the last 10 years. And there are so many different topics that are being explored throughout this book. There's lots about her creative journey, creating something that's so meaningful to you, which might not get the success that you hope that it will, and just all the emotions that surround doing something like this. And it also explores grief because Casey lost her mom and all of the complicated and devastating feelings that come with this. And this book just touched me in many, many ways. I loved following Casey and her story and everything that she's feeling. And again, I was very, very happy that it wasn't just a love triangle. So yes, there was a love story and it didn't completely ruin the whole book for me. It wasn't too much. I enjoyed reading about her complicated love triangle and it did add something to the story. It added a different layer. And again, I was really glad that I picked up this book. I was glad to have followed Casey's journey. And if you're a 20-something, I think you will get a lot out of this book, or whatever age, not just 20-something, whatever. If you're struggling in life, I think this might be a good book for you to pick up because there are so many different topics that are being explored, and I think if you are struggling, many things that you might relate to. So I would give this book an 8 out of 10. This next book, I did not technically read it, but I actually listened to the audiobook. It's Half His Age by Jeanette McCurdy. I have to say that I am so glad that I did end up listening to the audiobook because it was narrated by Jeanette McCurdy herself. And the way that she told the story made it so much more special, at least for me, because she has such a, I don't know how to describe it. I almost want to say blunt way of talking, just very forward, and she doesn't articulate too much. She doesn't decorate her sentences too much. So it just adds another layer of realness to the story, which makes it sometimes a little bit more heavy because this is already a really heavy story to begin with. We follow Waldo. Waldo is a high school student and she's struggling with her mental health. She also has a very difficult relationship with her mother, so there's a lot going on in her life, just on top of being a teenager, which is just exhausting in of itself. And one day she develops this crush or maybe almost obsession with her teacher, and he joins in on it, and it goes as far as them having an, what do we call it, relationship. I don't want to call it relationship, but it, you know, affair, abusive situation, relationship with, you know, an obvious age gap, obvious power dynamic, a lot of toxicity going on. And as I said, it's a sometimes very difficult story to get through, even more difficult if you've ever been in a situation like this where you've experienced this kind of a power dynamic. But it's a very real story because millions of people go through these situations. So it's important that we keep talking about it. So I'm so glad that she decided to write about it, because again, she has a very real way of portraying these difficult situations. And sometimes sometimes I feel like when these relationships with these kind of power dynamics get explored, it can come across as romanticized, and I feel like in this case this does not happen at all. So again, very, very important story, and she does such a great job at portraying mental health and mental health issues. And I love her writing style. I'm so glad that after her book, I'm Glad My Mom Has Died, which also big recommendation if you haven't read that already. I'm so glad that she decided to turn to fiction. And I hope that she keeps writing, and I hope that she keeps putting out stories, because again, she's so good at exploring these difficult, complex situations and feelings. So I'm gonna give this book I want to give it a 10 out of 10, honestly. Okay, let's do 9 out of 10. Big recommendation. Continuing on, we have The Housemaid, a psychological thriller. I know a lot of thrillers. I should really switch it up. You know, me complaining about reading too many romance books and being annoyed by it, but then just me reading too many thrillers, and I should really switch it up. Maybe, you know, this is good. This is good. I think that I'm filming this video because I can reflect on my reading habits. And again, you know, I think reading too many of these thrillers might not be the best for my mental health. So let's focus on maybe next month reading a couple of different stories. Maybe romance. Maybe I should just be an absolute hypocrite and pick up a romance book next. Okay, but I oh my god, I think I also listened to, did I listen to, yes, I also, another audiobook. I did not technically read it, but The Housemaid, I listened to the audiobook, also psychological thriller, and I decided to give it a go because of the movie being released. And for a second I was about to go see it in the cinema, but then I didn't. So I decided to read it, listen to it. But if you haven't heard of the story, it's about Millie, who's had a very difficult life so far. She was in jail and has difficulty finding a job. One day she gets an offer from the Winchesters to work as their housemaid. So we get to meet Nina and Andrew Winchester, who live a very privileged life. They live in a big house with one child, a little girl. And the further we get along in the story, Nina starts acting stranger and stranger. And the more outrageous her behavior gets, the closer Millie and Andrew become. Surprise, surprise. I found this sometimes a little bit difficult to listen to, because despite their marriage not being the best, I also don't want to listen. Someone simping over a married man or someone in a relationship, I found that very boring, and I also did not understand where her sudden romantic interest in Andrew came from. It just appeared that it kind of happened out of nowhere. Just one day a switch flicked on and she suddenly was romantically interested in him. And as Millie continues her work for the Winchesters, everything just becomes stranger and stranger, and that's all I'm gonna say. And again, this was an okay listen. Again, it didn't surprise me. I thought honestly that there would be a bigger plot twist. I was a little bit disappointed because this was such a hyped up story, and again, maybe it was just my own expectations. Maybe if I didn't lead with that, maybe I would have enjoyed it more. But still, it kept me entertained as I listened to it on my daily walks. It wasn't a boring listen, just again, I expected a little bit more. I'll definitely watch the movie when I get the chance to. And I might also listen to part 2, because I just realized that there's actually a second book to this. So maybe I'll enjoy that more. So I'm gonna give this book a solid 5 out of 10. The last book that I read in February was It Lasts Forever and Then It's Over. This is a very short read. It's under 200 pages. And if you're going to pick this up, I would highly recommend you reading this in one go. I think it's really important for the atmosphere, or else the whole setting might just get completely washed over you and not really soaked up. It's set in a zombie apocalypse, but it's not the stereotypical setting. This is not a science fiction or fantasy book. We follow a narrator who navigates through her new existence. She doesn't remember her name, but remembers the one that she loved and what that feeling entailed. And one day she starts traveling, and with this journey we explore a landscape with many, many feelings of grief and loss. This book felt so gut-wrenching so many times. There were so many beautiful words, beautiful sentences in this. But I have to say, do not read this if you are in a bad headspace. If you're mentally struggling, do not read this, because as I said, it sometimes is extremely gut-wrenching. And also, don't read this if you don't like clear stories if you need a very clear beginning, clear middle, clear end, and a story that really guides you. This might not be the book for you, because it doesn't entail that. It's more about the atmosphere and more of the setting and all of the emotions that come with it. And the author is so good at setting the scene. Again, very gut-wrenching at times. Many feelings of loss and grief are being explored. And again, do not read this if you are struggling, because I read this when I had a very bad week, and I especially read this one night. I did not listen to I didn't know this, but I did not read this in one sitting. I kind of split it up, having read it in multiple days. And I read a lot of it in one night when I was really struggling, and it was not fun. It was not fun. So just warning you, but a very beautiful book and very, very different to everything that I've read in the last 2 months. And it's a book that really touched me. And it's also one that I keep thinking about, keep thinking of the whole atmosphere that was painted in this book. I cannot explain it and I cannot put it into words. So if you want to experience it, you really have to read it for yourself and see if you can get anything out of this story. But definitely a big recommendation from me. So I'm gonna give this an 8 out of 10. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you enjoyed listening to me ramble on about the books that I've read so far this year. And maybe I will see you again next time. Maybe I film another one of these, because this was definitely very, very fun to reflect upon my reading habits this year so far. I have to say, I definitely need to read something else than thrillers. The next book that I'll pick up needs to be something else, something that doesn't contain murder and violence and grief and tragedy. It needs to contain lots of romance and lots of love triangles. Maybe my brain needs that. It needs all the things that it despises at the moment. But maybe I need it again. Maybe the next video I film, maybe it will be like 10 romance books. All the friends to lovers to enemies to, I don't know what other arcs there are, but I hopefully will see you in the next video, and then we'll talk about what I have consumed. And in the meantime, if you want to share any recommendations, maybe for romance books, maybe something that I need to pick up, do let me know. And again, thank you so much for watching and listening, and I hope that you have a good day or whenever you're watching this, and sending you lots of good energy. And until next time, hopefully, bye!